The Canon EOS C70, the camera some YouTubers claim not to be a cinema camera, has joined the list of approved cinema cameras for the Netflix original content. Today, I'm going to explain why ultimately none of this actually matters. What's up everybody, James Jackson here, back again with another video. If you're new to my channel, I do tips, tricks, news, and review for the film and video making industry. So if you do like the content here, please hit the likes. The likes absolutely help my channel out to be seen by others. Hit the subscribe button as well as that bell so you can stay up to date on all the content going forth. Okay guys, please forgive me for this video. I have quite a few feelings and emotions about this particular news that was recently announced, so this video may seem to be all over the place, but trust me, there is a reason for the madness. Maybe. So if you haven't heard, the Canon C70 was just approved by Netflix to join the list of specs of specific cinema cameras that will be pre-okayed for their original content. Now, I've been wanting to make a video about this particular topic, the Netflix approved list, for quite some time. However, I always felt that if I did this on certain other cameras, the S1H, then I would be immediately labeled as a Panasonic hater or some sort of Canon fanboy or Blackmagic fanboy, which, of course, if you go back through my channel history, you will see just how ridiculous that is. Now, if you guys saw my initial thoughts on the C70 when it first was officially announced, I told you guys that I was almost certain this camera would get Netflix approved based on the S1H being approved, and this camera packs even more professional features than that camera. Although I will say it is quite interesting that the Netflix stamp of approval helps give the C70 validation that is indeed a cinema camera, when there was quite a few YouTubers who shall remain nameless made what I would consider a very moronic statement that the C70 is not a cinema camera, yet the A7S is a cinema camera in a mirrorless body. By the way, the A7S III is not approved to be on this list. Again, we'll get to why it doesn't really matter later, but before the Sony fanboys come at me calling me a Sony hater or an A7S III hater, or some believe I am some sort of Canon fanboy, because it seems from my recent videos that the perception is I am constantly dogging the A7S III. Please let me be clear about this and let me clear this up, as this has been bothering me for quite some time, and I promise I will get to the Netflix portions. If you want to, you can jump to the last part of the timestamp below so you can just skip all this. Now look, I don't hate the A7S III. I actually think the A7S III is a really good, solid camera. In fact, most of my comments are not about the camera itself, but to the community that believes that if you don't call the camera the greatest camera of the year and of all time, then you are some sort of fanboy or hater, and if you dare say that the R5 is on par with the A7S III because the big wig YouTuber influencer says it's not, then you lose credibility. Even though there are several tests and videos done on the A7S III and the R5 that show that they are actually a lot closer in terms of dynamic range and technical specifications than many people try to make it out to be. But that's not either here or there. I don't see the A7S III as a cinema camera personally, but that doesn't mean it's bad. I see it as a video-centric camera, similar to the R5. I don't see the R5 as a cinema camera. I think they both are on equal playing fields for the ecosystems they have. So stop trying to turn everything into a fan war and just go focus on making content. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's dive into the Netflix list. Now, many of you are probably wondering, why is it certain cameras like the Panasonic S1H and the Canon C70 and the Ursa Mini Pro get approved for the Netflix list, but cameras like the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K and 6K, the Canon C200, and the Sony A7S III are not on this list? Because on paper, it does appear all of these cameras have the requirements of the list: a minimum of a UHD sensor, either 16-bit linear RAW or 10-bit 422 log, an all-intra codec option at minimum, and so pretty much it looks like it's got the technical specifications. But there is a specific requirement that none of these cameras have in their technical specifications, and that is the ability to generate in sync timecode internally. That's right, timecode. That is the reason why these are not on the list. Now, for all my black cinema camera users, you're probably about to type it out in the comments something like, hey, wait a tick, we have the ability to jam sync timecode through the 3.5mm port. And you would be right. In fact, the jam sync port through the 3.5mm port is actually more accurate at maintaining proper timecode and not falling out of sync than the Panasonic S1H. But because the S1H has the ability to generate timecode in and out through the flash port, it meets the requirements and therefore is able to get on the list for it. The Blackmagic cameras cannot generate in and out timecodes, therefore they do not meet the requirements of this list. So for those of you that are wondering why is it that the C70 has a BNC port on the side handle that is not capable of monitoring out, but only timecode, this is why. For Canon to meet the minimal requirements needed to get on the Netflix pre-approved cinema camera list, they needed the timecode. Now, if you're feeling confused, angry, upset, or some other emotions about these silly requirements and feel your A7S III is now inadequate because you want to make amazing projects that you want to eventually sell to Netflix, stop right there and don't fret, because odds are that this list for Netflix is completely meaningless in your goal of getting your project onto Netflix. So here's the honest truth. This list should only matter if, and please pay attention to this part, you are already either working with relationships with Netflix, Netflix is specifically producing and funding your project, and finally, the project is to be part of Netflix original content. So in layman's terms, if Netflix hasn't cut the check for your film project for it to be on Netflix original, then this list means diddly squat. If your goal is to simply get your project onto the Netflix platform, then you can film your work on something like a Canon 5D Mark II or an A6300 or a GH4, and it can still get on Netflix. It ultimately comes down to the following things. Do you know someone who works directly for Netflix? Or in other words, an insider relationship, networking. That is one way to get it on Netflix. Is your project making the rounds at film festivals and generating major buzz? That will help you get on Netflix. And last and most importantly, is the story you are telling any good? Because ultimately, that's what this is going to be about, and that's what's going to get you on Netflix. Yes, people, it all comes down to story. When I gave some critiques to the S1H, I got hit with comments after comments of people saying, you don't know anything. It's Netflix approved. When clearly they have no idea that this list is only important if Netflix is cutting the check. And as I said back then, if Netflix is cutting you a check, they typically will probably add a couple zeros at the end of the cut of that check compared to what you probably would have spent. And in that case, I ask, would you still use an S1H when you're given a budget for using, say, a Red or an Ari or something like a Venice, etc., etc.? The same is what I would say regarding the C70. While I am happy that it receives the deserved validity of being an actual cinema camera against the idiot Canon bashers, if Netflix is cutting the check for millions upon millions of dollars, I would still select a camera like the C500 Mark II or C70 or something high that would basically be a more reliable production workflow. However, in times like these, where COVID pandemic is having companies scale back on their budgets, it's also nice to know that we do have options should we need it, like the S1H and the Canon C70. So if you want to learn more about the Netflix list, I would highly recommend watching Armando's video. He did a great job on it. And if you're interested on how to get your content onto Netflix in more specific details, I highly suggest looking at Craft Show's video as they discuss getting their content onto Netflix, as well as Ted Forbes' Art of Photography's Netflix video. All those are great content to look forward to. What I hope you get from this video is to stop worrying about the camera gear so much and just go out and make great content. Because if you're not making anything, you are just standing still as the world goes by. That's it for me for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And as always, be sure to subscribe to the channel. And until next time, take care, everyone.